Hi, and welcome to part 8 of my Python Programming for Beginners tutorial series. In the next few videos, we're going to be going over some of the different collection data types in Python. So today we're going to be looking at lists, and then we're going to be looking at tuples, sets, and dictionaries. So all of these are data types in Python that are used to store other data. So firstly, we're going to be looking at lists today. So lists are used to store other data inside of them. Now it can have duplicate data, which we'll see later on in other collections. They can't have duplicates in them in some of them. It's completely mutable. So what that means is you can change an array, you can grow, you can shrink it, you can change elements within it. You can do tons of built-in operations on it, like we can sort it. So we're going to be looking at a lot of these different features today. So let's look at creating lists and let's just see what we can do. All right, so to first create a list here, kind of like everything else in Python, we're just going to create it here. Now, what determines a list is actually these square brackets here. So this would be similarly to like arrays in other languages, like arrays in PowerShell or arrays in JavaScript. Lists would be the Python equivalent. Now you can store multiple data types in an array. Now that's not really recommended, but you could technically store integers, you could store strings in the same array and it'll be perfectly fine. You should try to keep the data type within an array to the same. Just this way it's easier to kind of know what the array is going to be used for. And you can also have multi-dimensional arrays, lists, sorry. Um, and that would be, again, just putting a list inside of a list. We won't be seeing that today. We'll be seeing that in another tutorial because that does get quite complex in those situations. So let's firstly just create a list here of some integers. We're just going to call it levels, and we're just going to have 5 elements of 1 through 5. And then what we can do here is to access these elements. In Python, lists start at index 0. So if we do print levels 0 here, this is actually going to print off element 1. And then if we did print levels 2, actually let's do print levels 1, this would actually print off element 2. If we did 2, that would print off element 3. So if we just look at this example here, we're going to see that we get 1 and 3. So exactly kind of what we did there. We could also print off the whole array if that's what we, the whole list, if that's what we wanted. So here we have our whole list of 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then we can also, what we can do is what's called a slice. So we can print off a like subsection of this array. So what that would do is kind of like similar to our for loops. We'll have colons here to determine our steps and our start. So here we'll have our start, our stop, and our step here. Now, one thing to note is that the stop is non-inclusive. So what that means here is if we put our start at 0 and we'll put our stop at 2 here, and we'll just put our step to 1. I just want to show you guys a full example of using all these steps here. That will start at index 0 and it'll include index 0. It'll include 2, which is at index 1. But it will not include 3 because 3 is at index 2, but this is a non-inclusive. So if we look at that here, we only get 1 and 2. Now, we don't need the step. By default, the step will just be 1. And in theory, in this case, we don't even need this 0 here, By default, the start will always be 0. So we get the same thing. But let's say if we wanted all the items from 3 to 5, but we didn't know how long this list was, we could simply do index 2 and then just the colon here, and there we'll get 3 to 5. So if you don't have the start option defined, it'll automatically start at 0. If you don't have the end option defined, it will instantly stop at the end of the list. And then you also have your step. So what we could do is we could just do a blank start, a blank stop, and then a step of 2. This will start at the beginning of the list, end at the end of the list, and go over every other item. So here we should see 1, 3, and 5, I believe. Yeah, so we do see 1, 3, and 5. So these are all the things that you can do with what's called slicing. So that could definitely come in handy. Now, what we can also do is we can also change items here. So let me just print off the list here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the item at index 0. And we're going to change that to be 100. And then we're going to print levels again here. All right, so here basically we're defining our list 1 to 5. We're going to print it off. We're going to change the first item to 100 and we're going to reprint it. So let's see what this looks like here. So we do see the first item has changed. So you can do this for any items that are already in there. This will simply allow you to change what is there. So let me actually just leave some of these other examples here just so you guys can see them. So that will just print off one, and then this will do a slice here. Okay. All right, and then what we can do is we can also add to the lists. Now there's 2 ways that you can add to a list. So one of the ways that we can add to a list here is by using the append or the insert options. So what that looks like here is if we do levels.append, and this will take an item. So let's append the item 6 here. So now we will see that it will print off the list before, so 1 to 5, and then we'll be adding 6 to the end of it, and then we'll print off levels here. So as you can see, we get 1 to 6 now. Now there is also another way to add items to a list, and that is the insert method here. So let's say if we wanted to do insert here, and let's insert at the index 0, and we are going to insert, let's insert 0 here. So we're going to have a list now of 0 through 5. So if we look at this here, we will see now that I managed to add the 0 in front here. Now, if I changed this to index 1, 0 will now be the second item in the list because it will be at index 1. So these are ways that you can insert items into a list anywhere that you would really like, which is a very, very handy feature. Now, let's say you wanted to also remove an item here. So let's just append 6 back to it here. And let's go ahead and let's just see what we get here. So right now we have a list of 1, 0, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So let's go ahead and after this here, let's do a remove here. So what we can do here is remove. And then for remove, you're going to want to put in the value you want to remove, and it will remove the first occurrence. So let's say you have multiple values in the list that are the same. So if you have like 111, it will only remove the first one that it sees. So if we just do here, we're going to remove our item 0, and then we are going to print off levels. So this isn't going to remove the index 0, but the actual item 0. So let's see here. Now, as we can see, we print off our levels, we add 6 to the end, we insert 0 at index 1, and then what we did is we removed 0, which actually removes the actual item 0. Now, if we wanted to specify the index that we wanted to remove, so let's remove this item 3 here. That would actually be as simple as doing levels.remove, dot pop, and then we're going to put in the index. By default, the pop will remove the last item in the list, and we're going to be seeing that in just a moment here. But first, let's just remove the item 3. So here we do see that we removed the third item. And now if we call pop again here, and we just take out the 2, we can do print levels here. And we see that we have removed 6. So remove will remove the specified item. So if you have a list of strings, you would just pass in a string here. If you have integers, you would just pass in the integers here. And again, it will only remove the first occurrence of that item, not all of them. And then we have the pop function. The pop function by default will remove at the end of the list, kind of like append will always add to the end of the list. Pop will always remove from the end of the list unless you pass in the index value of which you want to remove. And that's pretty much how you would access a list. So we've learned how to create a list, how to get items from a list, how to get a subset of items from the list. We've seen how to add to a list, how to remove from a list. Now let's see some other features that we can do with lists here. So I'm actually just going to take out all this code here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you guys how to copy a list the proper way here. So we're going to do copy levels equals levels. So now if I do print levels and then print copy levels, now this will be the same list, which is what we would expect. But if I do levels, so here we are, and I'm just going to do this underneath the print. If we do a levels.append 6 here, and then we reprint both of these arrays, what do you guys think will happen here? So we created our first list here of 1 through 5, and then we created this other variable, and we set it to the list levels, and we're printing off both of these lists. And then on the levels list, we append 6, and then we print off the levels list and the copy levels list that we created at the beginning. So let's see what happens here. So we actually see that the copy levels actually ends up being the exact same as levels, even though we only added the 6 to our levels list. This is because by doing this copy levels equals levels, sets a reference to this list. So what that means is basically it just means it's pointing to that list. It is not actually creating its own copy of it. Now, in order to create a copy of the list, you would have to do .copy. And now if we run the same code, we can see that only levels has gotten changed. So you can use this copy method to create a copy of a list. So if ever you need to take a copy of it before modifying your list, this way you're not ruining that initial data set, you could do that as well. You would, of course, at that point, probably just modify copy levels and not levels. This way you're not affecting any of the original data. Now, another thing that you might want to do is sort a array here, or list, sorry. So to sort a list here, so let's just create a list of just random numbers here. So we have a bunch of numbers here that aren't in any order at all. And we have some of the same numbers here as well. So if we do print, then we do levels dot sort. So if we look at this here, oops. Sort is a in place method here. So if we just do levels dot sort and then levels here, we will see that the array is sorted. So the actual dot sort method on arrays doesn't return anything. It will just sort the actual levels list. Sorry, I keep using the word array just because these are very similar items through different languages here. So yeah, this will sort the list in place. So if you don't want to affect that original data set, you're going to want to again use that copy method on the levels list and copy it to another variable and then sort that variable instead. But that's how you would sort your list. Now, these are all functions that we can do on lists. Some of these you could do on other data sets. We'll be going over the other data sets in the next few videos. So this was really the lists. I would probably recommend going over this video another one or two more times if you didn't quite understand one of these, and just kind of go over the different type of functions you could really use with lists. There are other ones. I've just gone over what I would say are probably the most common that you're going to be using. You could also consider the dot count method here. So if we did count and then let's say 6 here, it's going to count the number of times 6 appears in the list. So that could be another method that you might use a lot in your programs or scripts here. But that pretty much covers everything to do with lists. In the next video, we're going to be looking at tuples. In the video after that, we're going to be looking at sets. And in the video after that, we're going to be looking at dictionaries. And then we're going to be going back into the for loops because as you remember in the for loop video, I mentioned that there was specific for loop for these collection data types. So we're going to be looking at that after we've covered all the different types of collections. So make sure you like and subscribe and hit that notification bell so you can know when that next video comes out. And I will see you on the next video.